The late autumn air in Blackwood Creek, Massachusetts, carried the crisp scent of decaying leaves and an underlying chill that seemed to seep into the very bones. Sunlight, weak and diluted, struggled to pierce the dense canopy of ancient oaks that surrounded the infamous Ravencroft Estate. Elara Vance, a young, ambitious investigative journalist, shivered, pulling her trenchcoat tighter. The wind whispered through the skeletal branches, sounding suspiciously like a chorus of mournful sighs. She tried to dismiss it as an overactive imagination, a byproduct of the chilling rumors that clung to the estate like cobwebs. Elara had driven for hours from Boston, leaving behind the cacophony of the city for the oppressive quiet of this rural pocket. Her editor, a man who thrived on sensationalism, had pitched the story with a glint in his eye. The Ravencroft curse, Elara, a family that just faded. No trace, no explanation. Just a sprawling mansion locked up tight for 50 years. He'd called it a goldmine, a guaranteed viral hit. Elara, however, was drawn not by the sensationalism, but by the nagging questions the case presented. A family of prominent industrialists, the Ravencrofts, had simply vanished in the winter of 1974. No bodies, no ransoms, no farewell notes. Just an empty house and a town that whispered secrets behind closed doors. She stood before the wrought-iron gates, rusted shut and overgrown with ivy. The estate loomed beyond, a Gothic silhouette against the muted sky. Stone gargoyles, their faces weathered and chipped, stared down from the high walls, their empty eyes seemingly following her every move. A sense of unease, cold and prickling, snaked up her spine. This wasn't just an abandoned house, it felt like a mausoleum. After a few phone calls and a surprising stroke of luck with an elderly retired sheriff's deputy, Elara had secured temporary access. He'd warned her, his voice raspy. That place holds a darkness, child. Some things are best left undisturbed. Elara, ever the pragmatist, had nodded politely, attributing his words to old age and local folklore. Now, standing at the threshold, she wasn't so sure. The main door, a massive slab of dark wood, groaned open with a sound like a tortured breath. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through the grimy windows. The air inside was heavy, stale, and smelled of decay and forgotten memories. The grand foyer was swallowed by shadows, even in the meager daylight. A sweeping staircase ascended into darkness, its balustrade intricately carved with twisted serpentine figures. Portraits, shrouded in cobwebs, stared down from the walls, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow her. Elara pulled out her flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. She moved slowly, her footsteps echoing unnaturally loud on the polished marble floor. The silence was profound, broken only by her own ragged breathing and the distant creak of the old house settling. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe, playing tricks on her peripheral vision. Her investigation began methodically. She started in the study, a room filled with leather-bound books and heavy mahogany furniture. Dust lay thick on everything, preserving the room exactly as it had been left. On a large desk, a half-finished game of chess sat frozen in time, pieces poised as if waiting for the next move. A journal lay open beside it, its pages yellowed and brittle. Elara's heart pounded as she carefully picked it up. It belonged to Elias Ravencroft, the patriarch. His elegant script detailed mundane daily events, then shifted subtly, hinting at growing anxieties, an increasing sense of being watched, of shadows moving where they shouldn't. "The nights grow longer," one entry read, "and the house, it feels as if it breathes around me. Agnes hears whispers. Thomas sees things in the corners of his eyes. Are we all succumbing to some collective madness, or is there truly something here?" Elara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the outside air. She continued to flip through the journal, her gaze scanning for clues, for anything that could explain the sudden disappearance. The entries became more fragmented, more frantic, filled with vague references to the creeping dread and the eyes in the dark. The last entry, dated November 15th, 1974, simply stated, "It knows. It's here." A sudden, sharp bang from upstairs made Elara jump, her heart leaping into her throat. She spun around, flashlight beam darting wildly. Nothing. Just the settling of an old house, she told herself, trying to steady her racing pulse. But the sound had been too distinct, too sharp to be mere structural creaks. It sounded like something had fallen. She hesitated, a primal instinct screaming at her to leave. But the journalist in her, fueled by a potent mix of curiosity and ambition, urged her forward. The mystery of the Ravencrofts had just deepened, and Elara found herself drawn further into its chilling embrace, unaware of the insidious threads that were already beginning to entangle her. If you're captivated by the unsettling secrets of the Ravencroft Estate, make sure to subscribe to the channel to follow Elara's journey into the unknown. This is a fictional story. Elara ascended the grand staircase, her flashlight beam trembling slightly as it cut through the oppressive darkness. The air grew colder with each step, carrying a faint, musty scent, like old lace and forgotten grief. The banister, once polished and gleaming, felt rough beneath her fingers, slick with decades of dust. The portraits lining the walls seemed to watch her, their painted eyes holding secrets Elara desperately wanted to uncover. She tried to rationalize the previous bang, perhaps a loose shutter, a gust of wind. Yet a knot of dread tightened in her stomach. The second floor was a labyrinth of shadowed hallways, each door a portal to another untouched room. Elara moved cautiously, her instincts on high alert. The silence up here was even more profound than downstairs, broken only by the muffled thump of her own heart. She checked each room methodically. The master bedroom, opulent but decaying, held a four-poster bed draped in dusty sheets, like a shroud. A vanity table still held tarnished silver brushes and an ornate mirror, reflecting only Elara's pale, strained face. The scent of old perfume lingered faintly, a ghostly whisper of Agnes Ravencroft's presence. In the children's rooms, a faint aura of innocence clung to the dust. Toys lay scattered on the floor, a porcelain doll with one eye missing stared blankly from a rocking chair, and a model train set sat half-assembled on a rug. It was as if the children had been playing one moment and simply vanished the next. The thought was chilling. This wasn't abandonment. It was an abrupt, inexplicable disappearance. Then she found it. A small, unassuming room at the very end of a narrow, seldom-used corridor. It wasn't opulent like the others. It was stark, almost Spartan. A single rickety desk stood in the center, and on it a stack of old letters tied with a faded ribbon. Elara's breath hitched. These weren't Elias's formal papers. They were personal. The letters were from Elias's sister Clara, who lived in a sanitarium several states away. They spoke of Elias's increasing paranoia, his morbid obsessions, and how the house was changing him. Clara wrote with a desperate plea for him to leave Blackwood Creek to escape the darkness that festered there. One letter, dated just weeks before the disappearance, was particularly disturbing. It read, "Elias, please listen. I know what you're doing. This isn't right. You're delving into things you shouldn't. The house, it responds to fear. You are feeding it. For the sake of Agnes and the children, you must stop. It's not a spirit, Elias. It's something far worse. It's the human mind, twisted and consumed by its own darkest corners. You are creating your own prison." Elara's mind raced. Not a spirit, Clara had written. Something far worse. This resonated with Elara's journalistic instincts. She preferred tangible human explanations to the supernatural. But what could Elias Ravencroft have been doing that was so terrifying, so consuming, that it led to the vanishing of his entire family? And why did Clara believe the house responded to fear? Was it a metaphor or something more literal? She continued to search the small room. Behind a loose floorboard near the desk, she found a hidden compartment. Inside, nestled amongst layers of dust, was a small, leather-bound book, its cover plain and unmarked. It wasn't a journal, but a collection of meticulous notes, diagrams, and clippings. Elias's handwriting filled the pages, but this time it was erratic, almost manic. The notes detailed Elias's experiments in sensory deprivation and psychological manipulation. He was obsessed with the idea that certain environments, combined with specific psychological stressors, could induce heightened states of fear and anxiety, even hallucinations. He believed he could purify the human mind by stripping away all external stimuli, forcing it to confront its own deepest fears. He had been conducting these experiments in a specially prepared room within the estate, using what he referred to as volunteers, although the term felt chillingly clinical given the context. Elara's blood ran cold. Elias wasn't merely paranoid, he was a twisted experimenter. The creeping dread in his journal entries wasn't a premonition of an external force, but the terrifying reality of his own making. The eyes in the dark were the projections of minds under extreme duress, and the it that knew and was here. Was it the collective fear, the palpable psychological distress he had cultivated within these very walls? As she read, the faint sounds of the house seemed to amplify. A distant creak that could have been a floorboard, or perhaps a slow, deliberate step. A soft brush against the wall, like someone easing themselves along. Elara's breath hitched. Was she truly alone in this house? Or had Elias's horrifying experiments left a lingering imprint, a psychological residue that could affect her own mind? The thought was terrifying. She wasn't dealing with ghosts, but with the possibility of being trapped in a psychological echo chamber of someone else's madness. The initial bang she heard earlier, the whispers Clara mentioned, were these the effects of the house? Or was someone else here, observing her, a shadow moving in the peripheral? The distinction blurred, and the chilling reality of the Ravencroft family's disappearance began to take a far more sinister and human turn. Elara closed the leather-bound book with a soft thud that seemed to reverberate through the silent house. Her mind reeled with the implications of Elias Ravencroft's notes. This wasn't a haunting by spirits, but by human depravity and psychological torment. Elias, driven by a perverse intellectual curiosity, and perhaps his own growing mental instability, had turned his home into a laboratory for fear. The volunteers he mentioned, the purification of the mind, it all pointed to something far more horrifying than a simple disappearance. She tucked the book securely into her bag, a heavy weight against her hip. The air in the small room felt stifling, suddenly too warm, despite the chill outside. The silence that had initially felt profound now felt suffocating, as if the very air absorbed all sound, leaving only the frantic beat of her own heart. She felt a prickle of unease, a sensation that she was not alone, that the psychological echoes of Elias's experiments were beginning to seep into her own consciousness. Elara decided to explore the basement. If Elias was conducting experiments, a secluded, soundproofed area would be ideal. The staircase leading down was even darker and steeper than the one to the second floor. The steps groaned under her weight, each creak sounding like a protest from the house itself. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and faintly acrid. Her flashlight beam danced across stacks of old crates, forgotten furniture, and shelves laden with unlabeled jars. The basement was vast, extending far deeper than the house's footprint suggested. The stone walls were thick, muffling any sound from the outside world. This was where Elias had truly hidden himself and his secrets. At the far end of the basement, behind a makeshift wall of stacked firewood, Elara discovered a heavy, reinforced door, unlike any other in the house. It was made of thick steel, with multiple heavy-duty locks. Her breath hitched. This was it. This had to be the experiment room Elias had referenced in his notes. The door itself exuded an aura of oppressive finality, as if sealing away not just a space, but unspeakable acts. She tried the handle. Locked, of course. Her frustration mounted. She needed to see inside, to understand the full extent of Elias's madness. She ran her hands over the cold steel, feeling for any weakness, any crack. The locks were formidable, old but unyielding. Suddenly, a faint, rhythmic scratching sound reached her ears from behind the door. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was barely audible, like fingernails dragging across a rough surface. Elara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. It wasn't a creak or a groan of the house. It was too distinct, too deliberate. Her mind immediately tried to find a rational explanation. A rat. A branch scraping against an exterior wall. But the sound was coming from inside the sealed room, and it sounded desperate. She pressed her ear against the cold steel, straining to hear. The scratching continued, faint but persistent. Then a new sound, a low guttural murmur. It wasn't words, just a series of indistinct, raspy sounds like someone trying to speak through a parched throat. Elara's journalistic training kicked in, overriding her burgeoning fear. She needed a recording. She fumbled for her phone, activating the audio recorder. The scratching and murmuring continued for several long minutes, a chilling duet of unseen desperation. Then, as abruptly as it began, it stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying, pregnant with unspoken horrors. Was someone still in there? After 50 years? The idea was preposterous, yet the sounds had been undeniably present, undeniably human. Or were they simply the echoes of past torments, lingering in the confined space, a byproduct of Elias's experiments? He had written about how intense psychological states could leave an imprint. And was she witnessing, or rather hearing, such an imprint? She backed away from the door, her skin crawling. The metallic, acrid smell in the basement seemed stronger now, and she suddenly recognized it. The faint scent of old blood. Not fresh, but ancient, deeply embedded in the very fabric of the place. Elias's experiments, designed to strip away sanity, had likely led to more than just vanished minds. They had led to death. Elara stood in the oppressive quiet of the basement, the recording on her phone, a chilling testament to the unseen horrors within. The mystery of the Ravencroft family wasn't just about their disappearance, it was about the unspeakable suffering that preceded it. A silent chronicle of dread etched into the very walls of the estate. And she was now standing at its very heart, the invisible tendrils of Elias Ravencroft's madness reaching out to ensnare her. The feeling of being watched intensified, a cold dread washing over her. She knew she had to leave, but the magnet of the mystery was too strong. Elara emerged from the chilling depths of the Ravencroft basement, the cold, stale air clinging to her clothes and skin. The recording on her phone felt like a hot coal in her pocket, a silent testament to the unspeakable horror locked behind that reinforced door. The scratching and guttural murmurs had solidified a horrifying truth. Elias Ravencroft's experiments were not just psychological manipulations, they were tortures, and perhaps even led to something far more sinister than a mere vanishing act. The faint smell of old blood haunted her nostrils. She needed answers, official records, anything to connect Elias's perverse research with the family's disappearance. Her mind raced, sifting through the limited information she had. The old sheriff's deputy, the one who granted her access, had mentioned a local archive, a repository of historical documents, including town records and old newspaper clippings. It was a long shot, but it was her only lead outside the house itself. The drive back through Blackwood Creek was quiet, the town seemingly asleep in the late afternoon gloom. The quaint storefronts and neat houses offered a stark contrast to the decaying grandeur of the estate. Elara pulled up to the small, unassuming building that housed the Blackwood Creek Historical Archive. It was a charming, albeit dusty place, run by an elderly woman with sharp, inquisitive eyes named Mrs. Albright. Mrs. Albright, her spectacles perched on the end of her nose, listened patiently as Elara explained her research, carefully omitting the more disturbing details of Elias's notes. "Ravencroft, you say?" Mrs. Albright hummed, her voice surprisingly strong. "Ah, a sad, sad business. The town never quite recovered from that mystery." She led Elara to a section overflowing with yellowed newspaper archives and brittle town records. "You'll find everything we have here. Just be gentle with the pages, dear. They've seen many a winter." Elara spent hours poring over the dusty documents. She found articles detailing the Ravencroft family's wealth, their philanthropic efforts, and then, abruptly, the sensational headlines announcing their inexplicable disappearance. The official reports were frustratingly vague. No signs of forced entry, no ransom demands. Extensive search yielded no clues. It was a dead end. Then she stumbled upon something else entirely. Not in the newspaper clippings, but in a small bound volume titled Blackwood Creek Census Records, 1970-1975. Flipping through the meticulously handwritten pages, she found the Ravencroft household entry for 1974. Elias, Agnes, their son Thomas, and daughter Lily. And then an additional name, handwritten in a different ink, almost an afterthought. Silas, caretaker. Elara's breath hitched. A caretaker? This was new. No official reports, no town gossip had ever mentioned a caretaker. Why was this detail missing from every other account? And if he was a caretaker, what happened to him? Did he vanish with the family, or was he involved in their disappearance? The possibility of an additional forgotten figure in the Ravencroft saga sent a jolt through her. She searched for more information about Silas. A quick cross-reference in the town's employment records yielded a single, faded entry. Silas Croft. Hired by Elias Ravencroft, October 1973. His last known address was a small cottage on the outskirts of Blackwood Creek, now long abandoned and dilapidated. The name itself felt vaguely familiar, a low hum in the back of her mind, though she couldn't place why. As she dug deeper, she found a series of peculiar entries in the local police blotter from the late summer and early autumn of 1974, just months before the Ravencroft disappearance. Several reports from local residents detailed strange lights and unusual sounds coming from the Ravencroft Estate late at night. One particularly disturbing report described a faint, high-pitched scream heard by a farmer living nearby, dismissed by authorities as wildlife. These reports had been filed by Silas Croft himself. Silas Croft wasn't just a caretaker, he was also reporting strange occurrences at the estate. Was he observing Elias's experiments? Was he a victim? Or worse, was he an accomplice? The idea of a complicit outsider, someone working with Elias, provided a chilling new dimension to the mystery. It also explained the lack of forced entry and the complete absence of a struggle. If Silas was involved, the Ravencrofts might have been led into their fate, perhaps under false pretenses related to the experiments, or even forcibly subdued by someone they trusted. As the sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the archive, Elara felt a renewed sense of purpose. The mystery was far from solved, but a new, tangible lead had emerged. Silas Croft, the forgotten caretaker. He was the key. But what secrets did he hold? And what had truly transpired in that house, orchestrated by Elias Ravencroft, and perhaps aided by this mysterious man? The shadows deepened, and a new kind of dread settled over Elara, the dread of what she might discover when she finally uncovered the truth about Silas Croft. The path ahead was dark, but a glimmer of hope, however faint, had appeared in the archive. Intrigued by the sudden appearance of Silas Croft? Don't miss the next thrilling revelation. Subscribe now to continue this chilling chronicle of dread. Remember, this is a fictional story. The scent of damp earth and decay hung heavy in the air as Elara navigated the overgrown path to Silas Croft's abandoned cottage. The address Mrs. Albright had given her was barely a smudge on an old map, pointing to a forgotten corner of Blackwood Creek, far from the manicured lawns of the Ravencroft Estate. The wind, now biting and raw, whistled through the skeletal trees, carrying a mournful, almost human sound. Elara pulled her coat tighter, her gaze sweeping the desolate landscape. The cottage itself was a dilapidated shell, its windows boarded up, its porch sagging precariously. A thick tangle of brambles and dead vines clung to its sides, giving it the appearance of a building being slowly consumed by the earth. It was a place where secrets could easily wither and die, or perhaps fester and wait. Elara approached cautiously, her reporter's instincts warring with a growing sense of apprehension. If Silas Croft was involved in the Ravencroft disappearance, this cottage might hold vital clues, but it could also hold dangers. She peered through a gap in the rotting boards of a window. The interior was dark, choked with dust and cobwebs, but she could discern the outlines of overturned furniture and debris. Finding the back door unlocked, a heavy groan protesting its opening, Elara stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with the smell of mold and rodent droppings. A chill colder than the autumn air seeped into her bones. The cottage was a chaotic mess, as if someone had left in a desperate hurry or as if it had been ransacked. Broken pottery, scattered papers, and an overturned chair lay strewn across the floor. Her flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a scene of disarray. In the living room, a crude wooden table was overturned, scattering old tools across the floor. The kitchen was equally disheveled, with broken dishes in the sink and empty food tins on the counter. It wasn't the meticulous disorder of time and neglect, it was the violent aftermath of a struggle. Elara moved slowly, carefully, her eyes scanning every corner. She was looking for anything that connected Silas to Elias, anything that explained his role. Under a pile of fallen books in a back bedroom, she found a small, locked wooden box. Her heart pounded. This had to be it. She tried to pry it open, but the lock was stubborn. Frustrated, she looked around, spotting a rusty crowbar in the corner. With a grunt, she leveraged the crowbar, and the old lock splintered, revealing the contents. Inside, beneath a layer of dust, lay a stack of letters. Not from Elias, but to Silas, from his brother. The letters were dated from 1973 to late 1974, providing a chilling timeline. Silas's brother, concerned about his increasingly erratic behavior, urged him to leave the Ravencroft estate. He spoke of Silas's growing paranoia, his sleepless nights, and his obsessions with the darkness within the house. One letter was particularly poignant, dated early November 1974, just days before the disappearance. It read, "Silas, you sound unwell. You speak of visions, of Elias's experiments changing people, of screams that aren't screams but something internal. You must leave that place. It's affecting your mind. He is twisting something vital within you. He is using your own anxieties against you." Elara's mind raced. Silas wasn't an accomplice, at least not willingly. He was another victim, psychologically tormented by Elias's sadistic experiments. The internal screams the brother mentioned perfectly aligned with Elias's notes on sensory deprivation and induced terror. Silas had been living in close proximity to the laboratory, perhaps even subjected to some of Elias's methods himself, intentionally or unintentionally. His reports to the police, dismissed as paranoia, were likely genuine observations of the terrifying events unfolding within the estate. But then, a disturbing discovery in the very bottom of the box. A single faded photograph. It was a picture of Silas Croft, younger, his face marked by a haunted, distant look, and standing beside him, a tall, imposing figure with an unnervingly calm gaze, Elias Ravencroft. But it wasn't just them. In the background, blurry but discernible, was a younger man with distinctive, piercing eyes who looked eerily familiar to Elara, though she couldn't immediately place him. He was not a Ravencroft, nor was he Silas's brother, who was explicitly mentioned in the letters as being far away. Who was he? The photograph shifted the narrative again. If Silas was a victim, who was the third man? And why was his presence erased from all official records? The cottage had provided not only confirmation of Silas's suffering, but also a new, unsettling puzzle piece. The disarray of the cottage, the broken lock on the box. Had someone else been here, searching for these very same clues, or perhaps trying to cover them up? As dusk deepened outside, casting long, eerie shadows through the broken windows, Elara felt a chill that transcended the cold. The mystery of the Ravencrofts was far more complex, more personal, and far more sinister than she had imagined. The psychological torment inflicted by Elias had not only consumed his family, but had also ensnared an innocent, and perhaps introduced a third party whose role remained terrifyingly unknown. And now she was stepping into the dangerous wake of that past, a dark, tangible history that still had the power to affect the present. The drive back to Boston felt longer and heavier than before. The contents of the wooden box, Silas's letters, and that unsettling photograph weighed on Elara's mind. She clutched the picture, studying the face of the mysterious third man. His eyes, even in the blurry old photograph, held an intensity that was deeply unsettling. Who was he? And why did he look so familiar? The question gnawed at her. Back in her small, cluttered apartment in the city, Elara spread out her findings. Elias's journal, his notes on psychological manipulation, the police reports, Silas's letters, and the photograph. She felt a growing sense of urgency, a pressing need to connect the dots before the lingering darkness of the Ravencroft Estate reached out to her. She pulled out her laptop and started cross-referencing names and faces. The Blackwood Creek community was small. Surely someone would recognize the man in the photograph, or at least remember a third party associated with the Ravencrofts. She started with local yearbooks, old community photos, anything she could access online. Hours blurred into a haze of research, fueled by strong coffee and a relentless drive. It was close to midnight when a name finally clicked. Buried deep within a digitized high school yearbook from 1972, under faculty and staff, a picture jumped out at her. The same piercing eyes, the same distinct jawline. The name beneath it, Arthur Finch, Psychology Department. Arthur Finch, a young, ambitious psychology lecturer at the local community college in the early 70s. Elias Ravencroft, a prominent, intellectually curious industrialist, would have been drawn to someone like Finch. He wasn't a family member, not a caretaker. He was a professional. This revelation sent a jolt of both understanding and dread through Elara. She remembered Elias's notes, his references to volunteers, and his detailed diagrams of the psychological experiments. It now made chilling sense. Elias, with his wealth and secluded estate, provided the venue and the subjects. Arthur Finch, with his academic knowledge of psychology, provided the scientific framework, the methodology. They were partners in depravity. Elara found Finch's academic publications from that period. They were esoteric, focusing on the human mind's breaking point under extreme stress, the malleability of perception, and the induction of controlled fear. His theories, abstract on paper, took on a horrifying new meaning when viewed through the lens of Elias's experiments. They weren't just theories, they were blueprints for torture. The next question was obvious. What happened to Arthur Finch? His academic career seemed to vanish after 1974. No more publications, no more faculty listings. He simply disappeared, just like the Ravencrofts. This confirmed her darkest suspicion. Finch was not just an accomplice, he was likely another victim, or perhaps the orchestrator who met his own demise within the walls of the estate. As she delved deeper into Finch's brief academic history, she stumbled upon something else. A small, almost insignificant newspaper clipping from a regional paper dated shortly after the Ravencroft disappearance. It was a brief notice about a missing person, Arthur Finch, last seen near Blackwood Creek. The article mentioned that his car had been found abandoned near the Ravencroft Estate. The police, overwhelmed by the Ravencroft case, had simply noted it as a potential related disappearance and filed it away. His case had gone cold, overshadowed by the more sensational vanishing of the prominent family. Elara now saw a more complete and far more disturbing picture. Elias, the financier and perhaps the initial enthusiast for these dark experiments, and Finch, the academic who provided the expertise. They were playing with fire, manipulating the human mind, pushing the boundaries of sanity. Silas Croft was an unwitting subject, a man whose mind was frayed by the psychological torment he experienced within the estate. The scratching and murmuring in the basement room, the internal screams Silas's brother mentioned. They were the sounds of human beings pushed beyond endurance, their minds unraveling under Elias and Finch's horrific regime. But the question remained, who was the victim, and who was the ultimate perpetrator? Did Elias turn on Finch, or Finch on Elias? Or did their escalating experiments lead to an unforeseen, catastrophic outcome that consumed them all, including the innocent Ravencroft family? As a cold draft swept through her apartment, rattling the window panes, Elara felt a prickle on her skin. The more she uncovered, the more exposed she felt. It was as if the past, now partially revealed, was reaching out, its chilling grasp extending across the decades. The story of the Ravencrofts was no longer a cold case. It was a living, breathing testament to the dangers of unchecked psychological ambition. And in revealing its darkest secrets, Elara couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that she, too, was now an unseen observer, drawn into the very web of terror that consumed the Ravencroft family and their academic accomplice. The air in Blackwood Creek felt heavier this time, charged with a palpable tension that mirrored Elara's own anxieties. Armed with the revelation of Arthur Finch's involvement and his own mysterious disappearance, Elara knew she had to return to the Ravencroft Estate. The cottage had offered fragmented answers, but the true horror, the full picture, lay within the very walls that had witnessed the unfolding tragedy. She secured a longer access permit, claiming she needed to document the structural integrity of the property for a new angle on the story. The retired deputy, perhaps sensing her unwavering resolve, simply shook his head and handed her the key, his eyes holding a familiar, wary glint. The estate loomed under a bruised grey sky, the looming threat of rain mirroring the storm brewing within Elara. This time, as she pushed open the heavy front door, she didn't just feel the chill of an old house, she felt the weight of the dark history within. The air seemed to vibrate with a silent scream, a residual psychic imprint of the horrors Elias and Finch had unleashed. Her first destination was the study, where she had found Elias's initial journal. She reread the last frantic entry. "It knows. It's here." Her new understanding of Elias's experiments painted these words in a terrifying light. It wasn't a ghost. It was the psychological construct of their own making, the product of minds pushed beyond the brink. It was the collective fear, perhaps even a primal, destructive response from those subjected to their torturous methods. Next, she returned to the small, Spartan room where she found Silas's letters and the photograph. She examined the loose floorboard again, searching for any other hidden compartments, any other discarded clues. Running her hand along the wall, she noticed a faint outline, almost imperceptible against the faded wallpaper. It was a shallow indent, as if something had been pressed against the wall for a long time. She carefully peeled back the wallpaper, revealing a tiny, almost invisible crack in the plaster. Beneath the plaster, hidden in a small cavity, was another, much smaller, leather-bound notebook. This one was different. It wasn't Elias's elegant script, nor Silas's distressed scrawl. The handwriting was precise, academic, almost clinical. This was Arthur Finch's private journal. Elara's hands trembled as she opened it. The entries began academically, detailing initial theories on sensory deprivation and fear induction. Finch wrote with a detached scientific curiosity, almost a cold glee. But as the entries progressed, a subtle shift occurred. His language became less formal, more personal, revealing a growing unease. He documented the increasing instability of Elias Ravencroft, describing him as becoming obsessed, unpredictable, and prone to violent outbursts. Elias, it seemed, was not just the funder. He was an increasingly unstable participant in his own twisted experiments, perhaps even self-experimenting, pushing his own limits. Then, the true horror unfolded. Finch's entries detailed how the volunteers, likely including Silas Croft, began to break down. They experienced vivid hallucinations, extreme paranoia, and violent psychological reactions. Elias, instead of stopping, became more excited, seeing these breakdowns as proof of their theories. The last few entries in Finch's journal were a descent into terror. He wrote of Elias locking the family in the experiment room, the reinforced basement room, believing he could purify them of their own fears, free them from the darkness he believed was consuming them. Finch himself seemed to have tried to intervene, expressing horror at Elias's escalating madness. The final entry, dated November 16th, 1974, read, "He has gone too far. He locked them in. He believes he can force them to face the ultimate fear. I tried to reason with him, but he is beyond reach. He sees me as a threat, an obstacle to his purification. He believes I am infected by the very fears he seeks to eradicate. I am trapped. The scratching, the screams, they are from inside. He is listening. He is learning. He is adapting. He knows how to use our own minds against us. I can hear him now, coming for me. He will make me face my darkness. The house is alive with terror." Elara gasped, the words chilling her to the bone. This wasn't a supernatural entity. It was a man, Elias Ravencroft, driven to extreme psychological madness by his own experiments, consumed by the very darkness he sought to understand and purify. He had not just vanished. He had likely become a monstrous version of himself, trapping and tormenting his own family. And then Finch, in a horrifying final act of psychotic delusion. The sounds Elara heard in the basement, the scratching and murmuring, were the lingering echoes of the Ravencrofts and Finch's final, terrified moments, their minds breaking under unimaginable psychological pressure. The smell of old blood was not just a symbol of ancient violence, it was a testament to the ultimate physical end of lives trapped in Elias's monstrous creation. The house around her felt different now, no longer just abandoned, but a silent witness to a human tragedy of epic proportions. The mystery wasn't about what had taken them, but what they had become under the influence of Elias's madness. The ultimate perpetrator was the man himself, twisted by his own grotesque theories. And now, Elara was standing in the belly of that beast, holding the final testament to its horrific reign. The feeling of the house being alive with terror now resonated with a chilling authenticity that Elara could almost feel pressing in on her. The full horror of the Ravencroft family's disappearance is coming to light. Don't miss the chilling conclusion. Subscribe now to witness the full chronicle of dread. This is a fictional story, Elara retreated from the small room, Finch's journal clutched tightly in her trembling hand. The full, horrifying truth of the Ravencroft disappearance had finally clicked into place, a mosaic of madness and scientific depravity. Elias, consumed by his own experiments, had become a monster, trapping and torturing his family and then his accomplice, Arthur Finch, within the very walls of his home. The sounds from the basement, the faint smell of old blood, the eerie silence of the house. It all coalesced into a chilling narrative of human psychological breakdown. She sat on the cold, dusty floor of the hallway, trying to process the enormity of what she had uncovered. The urban legends, the whispered rumors of a curse, were merely a veil over a far more terrifying reality. The human mind, pushed to its absolute breaking point, capable of unimaginable cruelty. Elias Ravencroft hadn't simply disappeared. He had meticulously orchestrated the slow, agonizing demise of his own family, believing he was saving them, purifying them from fear. The weight of this truth settled heavily on Elara. This wasn't just a story. It was a tragedy, a chronicle of dread that demanded to be told with respect and clarity, not sensationalism. She thought of Silas Croft, the innocent caretaker, tormented into paranoia. She thought of Agnes, Thomas, and Lily, victims of their patriarch's deranged obsession. And she thought of Arthur Finch, initially a detached observer, then an unwilling participant, finally a desperate victim. The air in the house felt suffocating. Every creak, every shadow now felt imbued with the echoes of their final moments. She could almost hear the muted screams, the frantic scratching, the desperate pleas that Finch had described. Elias had created a psychological prison from which there was no escape, transforming his grand estate into a tomb of the living, then the dead. Elara knew she had enough, more than enough. She had the journals, the letters, the police reports, and the chilling audio recording from the basement. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and seemingly disconnected, now formed a horrifyingly coherent picture. Her next step was to compile everything, to write the definitive account of the Ravencroft tragedy, to finally bring their story out of the shadows. But as she prepared to leave, a new, unsettling thought crept into her mind. If Elias was truly consumed by his own psychosis, if he believed he was purifying them, what had happened to him? Finch's last entry implied Elias was still alive, still learning, still adapting. Had he succumbed to his own methods? Had he finally broken, becoming indistractable from his victims? Or had he, in his ultimate delusion, found a way to transcend, as his warped theories sometimes hinted? She walked back down to the grand foyer, her footsteps echoing. The portraits still stared down, but now their eyes seemed to hold not just secrets, but the lingering ghost of a terrible understanding. The silence of the house was no longer just an absence of sound. It was the heavy silence of a final, complete abandonment. Suddenly, a distinct faint movement in the peripheral vision caught her eye. At the top of the grand staircase, in the deepest shadow, a fleeting silhouette. It was gone in an instant, a trick of the light perhaps. But Elara's heart pounded. Had she truly seen something, or was the psychological weight of the house, of Elias's madness, beginning to affect her own perception? Finch's words echoed, "He knows how to use our own minds against us." She dismissed it as fatigue, as an overactive imagination, but the seed of doubt was planted. She felt a profound sense of isolation in that sprawling, silent house, as if the walls themselves were closing in, imbued with a residual consciousness of the suffering they had witnessed. The air grew colder and she shivered despite her coat. The final chapter of the Ravencroft story was written, but Elara couldn't shake the feeling that she was not just an observer, but somehow, now a part of its chilling legacy. The house had held its secrets for 50 years, and now, having opened them, she was connected to its profound and terrible darkness. The mystery was resolved. But the lingering dread remained, a testament to the chilling reality that the greatest horrors often lie not in the supernatural, but within the depths of the human mind. She needed to leave, to finally put this story to rest, but the house seemed to cling to her, its whispers now directed solely at her. Elara wasted no time once she was back in Boston. The chilling narrative of the Ravencroft family, once a tantalizing mystery, now burned within her as a profound tragedy. She locked herself in her apartment, ignoring calls and texts, and began to write. The words flowed from her, driven by the urgency of the truth she had uncovered. She wove together Elias's descent into madness, Finch's complicity and eventual victimization, Silas's torment, and the Ravencroft family's unimaginable fate. She wrote with a clarity born of horror, ensuring every detail was meticulously presented, every theory supported by the evidence she had gathered. She transcribed the audio recording from the basement, the faint scratching and murmuring, a chilling sonic signature of human minds breaking under duress. She meticulously scanned Finch's journal, ensuring that his final, desperate entries conveyed the full psychological impact of Elias's actions. The process was draining, emotionally and mentally. The more she wrote, the more the images from the estate haunted her. The dust-laden rooms, the overturned chess game, the scattered toys, and the heavy steel door to the experiment room. She found herself jumping at shadows in her own apartment, replaying the subtle sounds of the Ravencroft house in her mind. The initial rationalization of the bang and the silhouette on the stairs now felt inadequate, replaced by a nagging suspicion that the psychological residue of the estate had indeed latched onto her. A few days into her writing, a disturbing pattern emerged. Her dreams became vivid, fragmented nightmares. She saw glimpses of shadowy figures in confined spaces, heard muffled screams, and felt a suffocating sense of dread. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, the echoes of the internal screams from Finch's journal vibrating in her ears. During the day, she began to experience subtle shifts in her perception. The mundane sounds of city life, a distant siren, a neighbor's footsteps, would sometimes morph for a fleeting moment into the creaks and groans of the old mansion. She'd see fleeting movements in her peripheral vision, just like on the staircase, only to find nothing there when she turned. Her reflection in windows seemed to hold a fleeting, distant terror in its eyes. Elara, ever the pragmatist, tried to dismiss these occurrences as stress, fatigue, the natural psychological aftermath of immersing herself in such a dark story. She reminded herself of Finch's own chilling words. Elias knew how to use our own minds against us. He had cultivated fear, induced paranoia, twisted perception. It was only natural that the details of such a story, combined with her own intense focus, would begin to seep into her subconscious. Yet, a part of her wondered, was it simply psychological strain, or was there something more insidious at play? Had the prolonged exposure to the psychological horrors within the estate left her vulnerable, opening a door to the very darkness Elias sought to control? The boundary between reality and psychological torment, once so clear, began to blur at the edges. She decided to seek the advice of a trusted colleague, an older, more experienced journalist named Mark Jensen. He was a veteran reporter, cynical but empathetic, with a knack for cutting through sensationalism to the core truth. Over a late-night coffee, Elara recounted the entire Ravencroft story, omitting none of the gruesome details, including her own unsettling experiences. Mark listened intently, his usual cynical demeanor replaced by a somber expression. When she finished, a long silence hung between them. "Elara," he said finally, his voice low, "what you've uncovered is monumental, a true reckoning for that family and that town. But you need to be careful. When you delve into such profound human darkness, it can leave a mark. It's not supernatural, no. But the mind is a powerful thing, and collective fear, prolonged torment, they can create a resonance. He leaned forward, his gaze direct. You've walked through the echoes of madness. Your brain is processing it. Don't let it consume you. Write the story, get it out there. But then you need to distance yourself completely. Go on vacation, clear your head. The truth will be told, but you need to protect your own mind. His words were a sobering validation of her fears. It wasn't madness, not yet, but it was a warning. The psychological residue of Elias Ravencroft's reign of terror was real, and it was reaching for her. She had unearthed the truth of the Ravencrofts' disappearance, but the final, terrifying reckoning was her own struggle to emerge from the shadow of their dark past, her mind intact. The story was ready, but Elara herself was on the precipice of her own psychological battle, a testament to the fact that even without ghosts, true horror could leave an indelible, chilling imprint. The article, "The Dark Past of the Ravencroft Family, a Chronicle of Dread," was finally complete. Elara submitted it to her editor, feeling a profound sense of exhaustion but also a grim satisfaction. It was a meticulously researched, deeply unsettling exposé, stripped of all supernatural embellishments, presenting the unvarnished truth of Elias Ravencroft's psychological experiments and their devastating consequences. She included the chilling excerpts from Elias's and Finch's journals, the fragmented police reports, and the haunting audio from the basement, leaving no stone unturned in her quest for verifiable human horror. The story hit the presses with a quiet, yet powerful impact. It didn't generate the viral hysteria her editor initially sought, but it resonated deeply with those who read it. It was a story that chilled not with specters, but with the chilling reality of human cruelty and the fragility of the mind. Academics in psychology and criminology departments debated its implications, recognizing the rare insight it offered into extreme psychological manipulation. In Blackwood Creek, the revelation was a seismic event. The town was forced to confront its own whispered history, to replace folklore with fact, and to acknowledge the very human horror that had taken root within its boundaries. The Ravencroft curse was revealed to be a human-made terror, a testament to unchecked scientific ambition and deteriorating sanity, leaving a lingering, uncomfortable silence where vague superstitions once thrived. Elara, as Mark had advised, tried to distance herself. She took a leave of absence, packed a small bag, and drove north, seeking the quiet solitude of the New England coastline. The crisp sea air, the endless expanse of the ocean, and the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore were a balm to her frayed nerves. Slowly, painstakingly, the vivid nightmares receded, replaced by the gentle ebb and flow of the tide. The fleeting shadows in her peripheral vision diminished, and the spectral sounds of the house, which had once felt so real, faded into the background of her memory, becoming distant echoes rather than immediate threats. She journaled, not about the Ravencrofts, but about her own journey, her struggle to process the profound darkness she had witnessed. She found solace in long walks along the beach, in the simple act of breathing deeply, of feeling the sun on her skin. She understood now, more profoundly than ever, the insidious power of the human mind, both to create and to destroy, to heal and to scar. The experience had peeled back layers of her own perception, leaving her with a heightened awareness of the subtle, often terrifying interplay between mental states and physical reality. Months passed. Elara slowly regained her equilibrium. The experience had changed her, leaving an indelible mark, a deeper understanding of human suffering and resilience. But it hadn't broken her. She emerged stronger, more empathetic, more cautious, and strangely even more resolved in her pursuit of truth, however dark it might be. She learned to differentiate between external reality and the internal echoes of past traumas, a crucial skill after her ordeal. The house no longer held her captive. She had broken free, leaving its shadows behind. One crisp autumn morning, Elara received a package. It was from Mrs. Albright, the archivist in Blackwood Creek. The town, having digested the article, was now approaching the estate with new eyes, carefully inventorying its contents before any potential historical preservation or demolition. A note from Mrs. Albright read, "Dear Elara, after your article, there was renewed interest in the estate. During a careful inventory of old items, this was found tucked away in a hidden compartment in the master bedroom's vanity. It seems Agnes Ravencroft had secrets of her own. Perhaps this will bring some small closure to their story." Elara's heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. She carefully opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, was a single tarnished silver locket, and beneath it, a tiny, folded piece of paper. It was a single, fragile leaf, pressed flat and dry, and a handwritten note in delicate script, undoubtedly Agnes Ravencroft's. "My dearest children, Thomas, Lily, if you ever find this, know that I tried. Your father, he is lost to us. He believes this is a cleansing, a path to a higher truth. But it is madness. I have hidden this, a small reminder of the world outside, of hope. He will not find me. I will fight. I will find a way. For you. Remember the garden where the roses bloom, the hidden path. There is a way out. Always. Never give in to the fear. Never let it consume you. Your loving mother, Agnes." Elara stared at the note, tears welling in her eyes. Agnes had seen it. She had resisted. She hadn't vanished willingly, nor had she succumbed completely to the psychological torment. She had fought against Elias's twisted delusions, against the confines of the experiment room, seeking any glimmer of escape for herself and her children. The tiny pressed leaf, likely from a specific, perhaps unique plant in the Ravencroft garden, and the mention of the hidden path, it was a final, desperate message, a beacon of defiance in the face of absolute horror, a mother's last, desperate attempt to guide her children to safety or hope. Agnes, the loving mother, had tried to find a way out, even within the psychological prison her husband had created. This wasn't just a story of descent into madness. It was also a story of fierce resilience, of a mother's unwavering love and fight for her children, even in the face of unimaginable terror. It added a layer of profound human courage to the chilling narrative, a testament to the enduring spirit even when faced with the darkest corners of the human psyche. The ultimate fate of the Ravencroft family, including Elias, Agnes, Thomas, and Lily, along with Arthur Finch and Silas Croft, remained unconfirmed by physical evidence. No bodies were ever found, a chilling testament to the efficiency of Elias's secluded soundproof chamber, or perhaps the subsequent removal of evidence by others after the initial official searches ended. Perhaps someone attempting to erase their own tracks or simply clean up the devastating aftermath. However, Elara's investigation, culminating in Agnes's desperate note, provided the definitive psychological narrative. They hadn't vanished without a trace. Their minds, and perhaps their lives, had been consumed by the dark depths of Elias Ravencroft's own twisted creation, a chronicle of dread meticulously documented and now, finally, unveiled to the world. The story was told, and the ghosts of the past, finally, could begin to rest. This brings the dark past of the Ravencroft family, a chronicle of dread, to a close. If you found yourself drawn into the chilling depths of this human psychological thriller, please consider subscribing to the channel for more immersive and realistic stories. Thank you for watching. This is a fictional story.